everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Jessica Coots, and I am the climate and gender reporter here at the 19th. And I'm really excited for our panel this afternoon with these three amazing women that are leading some of the efforts across the region to address the climate crisis. So first, I'll start with a bit of an introduction. We have Rosanne Albright, and she is the Environmental Programs Coordinator with the City of Phoenix. We have Hansen, the Deputy Secretary for, Amanda's at the very end, the Deputy Secretary for Climate Change for the California Natural Resources Agency, and Selena LaRue Hatch, an Assembly member in Nevada. So thanks so much for joining us today. So I thought a good way to kind of get this conversation started was to start with a question that I sometimes ask people when I'm interviewing them for stories where they're kind of up against a big existential issue like the climate crisis, or they're fighting against the government or trying to advocate for their communities. And I'm always really interested to hear, like, what is that motivation? Where does that motivation come from? Like, what keeps you working on an issue that can sometimes feel overwhelming? I think can cause a lot of anxiety for some of us in the room. Selena, I thought I would start with you since I know this was one of your issues that you campaigned on and ran for.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. So I am a legislator in Nevada, but I am also a teacher and I am also a mom. My daughter is now 6, but when I first ran for office, she was 4, and that was the summer that Nevada had the wildfires, where for an entire summer, our sky was black and we could not go outside because the air quality was so horrendous. And I had a 4-year-old who couldn't go outside for 3 months. That was challenging as a parent, but also incredibly depressing and saddening, and I think could have led many parents to a dark place of this is hopeless, what can we do? Many of my friends looked at moving, but you look other places, Vermont is flooding, right? We can outrun wildfires and then we run into other issues. And so I just looked around and I realized something needed to be done. And it felt like a lot of what we were doing as a state and a nation was kind of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, but not actually making the systemic changes that we needed. And so I just decided, you know what, we don't have a voice for this right now in the legislature. We had 1 or 2 of my colleagues that are working on it, but not strong enough. And so if that voice wasn't being heard outside the building, then I was going to run for office and bring that voice into the building. And so that's really what motivated me is my daughter and my students and making sure they have a future.
Amanda, did you want to?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, I guess I'll just say I have worked on climate change my entire career, which is coming up on 20 years. And when I first started, I can really relate to what the AP videographer talked about in terms of you work on climate control, like what's that? And I've always been passionate about it, so I was very happy to talk about it. But my own feelings about the work has changed for the exact same reason. All of a sudden, climate is not something, that's going to happen in the future. The impacts are here now. And I also have children and I'm also nervous for them. So I also feel like, well, yeah, I can't stop now. I have to double down on my commitment to this field. It's the same motivation, but the urgency has really shifted in the last few years.
Well, thank you. I'll say ditto to all of that. And I've been working to clean up the environment since the past 40 years. So I started environmental consulting, and I remember, where we started, we knew in this field that our planet was being degraded. We knew that things needed to change, but we were still thought of as the tree huggers, if you all remember that way back when, that terrible term. So I've continued to persevere really to get things done because I know it is possible. I've worked on properties where it's taken 20 years to get something cleaned up and redeveloped, but it was possible. So every day I wake up and think about the possibilities because I see the passion in the new generation and folks that are working with me now, that they are just as committed as I am to continuing this work. And we're seeing the impacts, particularly here in Phoenix. You know, it breaks my heart to see that video that we saw of the homeless. And that's just one person of the many that are facing those situations, in addition to people living in their homes that might not even have air conditioning. So we see the impacts. We want to make that change. And it's possible. We're seeing our huge institution of the city of Phoenix making some changes, albeit slow, and we always wanted to go faster, but the possibilities are there.
Rosanne, thank you so much Rosanne, thank you so much for that. So speaking of the city of Phoenix, I know you've been working with the city for over 2 decades and you were working on the latest climate action plan. And I was wondering if you could talk about, a solution or some of the solutions that you're excited about that we're implementing here in the city of Phoenix that perhaps other cities, could adopt. I think this is extreme heat is becoming an issue that's impacting people all over the country, and they are looking to Phoenix to see what is happening here. And as a follow-up, you mentioned people without air conditioning, or we know that there are people that are more vulnerable to climate impacts in Phoenix. So how is the city addressing that and ensuring that those benefits are reaching those communities?
Thank you, Jessica, for that question. I'm really proud that the city has really gotten very much involved, not only committing to it just by our elected officials and city management saying that we're going to do it, but committing actual dollars. So over the past decade, we've spent about $600 million toward climate action activities. With regards to heat, we implemented an Office of Heat Response and Mitigation because we understood that there was a need to have staff dedicated to that arena. And just some of the things that we're currently doing specifically with residents and homeless is we have a big initiative also from the Office of Homeless Solutions that is putting together affordable housing and housing where we've moved. And I know there's a lot of controversy over the zone and people moving from that area, but getting folks into housing and getting them the resources that they need. With regards to residents, we have weatherization programs where we have funding that goes to residents directly to help them improve their energy efficiency, to get new HVAC, new systems, revamp their systems so they have access to that. We have water conservation programs that, for example, within our own city facilities, we're eliminating turf that is not used for an actual recreational purpose. We have incentives, which we kind of are, in my mind, late to the game, but we're still getting them done to have people put in water efficient toilets and better irrigation. We've always encouraged what we call zero-scape landscaping. Get rid of your lawn and get some desert landscaping in there. We're doing transportation. We're one of the only cities that is actually increasing transit where lots of others are not. We've got light rail, we've got bus rapid transit, we're creating multimodal transportation. So lots of things in lots of different areas.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing. Amanda, this next question is for you. As someone who works at a state agency that's really focused on land use and what are called nature-based solutions, I was wondering if you could talk about what is a nature-based solution, because I think a lot of people might not know, and how do we use that to either adapt or address to the climate crisis? And similar to what I asked Rosanne, how do you prioritize using nature-based solutions to help people and communities that are most vulnerable to the climate crisis?
Yeah. So nature-based solutions are essentially any kind of project or effort that integrates a natural process into the built environment. So for example, like bioswales in communities that are prone to flooding, or increasing tree canopy in communities that are prone to heat. They're also reflective of work that we do to manage natural landscapes. So you can manage forests, you can manage existing wetlands for climate benefits. And in California, what we talk about when we're talking about our nature-based solutions agenda is those kinds of efforts that deliver tangible climate benefits. And I would add, in addition to the resilience benefits that you've mentioned that I just ticked through, there's also real critically important carbon sequestration potential for these different landscapes to help us deliver on our commitment to carbon neutrality and net zero. So interesting kind of a space where you can both build resilience and address and move forward your climate mitigation agenda. To answer your question about how we make these investments in communities that are most vulnerable, I'll just sort of tick off a couple of things that first come to mind. So we created a new program in California called the Green Schoolyards Program, knowing that there are a lot of schools in California that do not have access to shade, that have a lot of asphalt, that are very hot. You know, we know that there are kids in California who go outside and put wet paper towels on their head to keep them cool, who get burned on slides, like unacceptable. So we're really pushing hard to ensure that these nature-based solutions prioritize communities that are most vulnerable to heat, or I should say schools that are in communities that are most vulnerable to heat. And we actually have a tool that we've developed called the California Heat Assessment Tool to help people understand what heat is coming. You know, we have really, really strong climate projections in California. So we can help people understand, you know, what might be coming down the line. You know, in other areas, for example, where we might do wetland restoration, we're going to identify a community where this wetland restoration might actually reduce flooding in a community that might be lower income than a community up the way. So there's really always an opportunity to be thinking about equity. And I'll just one last one is just, you know, we're infusing a lot of money into in California, we have something called the Conservation Corps, and these are essentially youth workforce development programs. We have a nature-based solutions program that we just propped up where we're supporting young people in the communities that are most vulnerable to climate change to essentially help them get into fields that will allow them to contribute to our nature-based solutions agenda, not just right now, but as a professional career.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, it actually made me wonder, are we doing similar things in Phoenix, or how is Phoenix addressing like the heat in schools issue?
So in Phoenix, one of the things that we work on right now is with school districts. We have the opportunity, we have a big tree and shade funding available right now. So we're working with schools to get shade trees in there, but also coordinating with our food systems office, which happens to be me and a few of my folks that are here today, to put in fruit trees as well. So we do two things. We have shade and we can provide access to healthy food as well. There's a lot of effort right now, and I'm glad that Amanda mentioned that trees for us are going in areas that need them the most, in those areas where the heat is the worst, which are particularly disadvantaged communities. So we're doing that as well.
Great. And Selena, this question is for you. You know, in thinking of land and land use, and this clean energy transition and trying to create livable cities, I think Nevada is actually a really important state to focus on because we've seen how the need for minerals like lithium is also, you know, becoming an issue with tribes who have land where there's cultural resources, where these companies want to come in and mine. Lithium, for those of you who don't know, is needed for batteries, for energy storage. And I think we're facing similar issues here in Arizona with copper and Oak Flats. So as an assembly member, you know, what is your stance on that issue? What does like good tribal engagement look like? What is going wrong? What could we be doing better in the future?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So Nevada is on the forefront because we have some of the largest lithium deposits in the world. And lithium is essential for battery technology, and renewables do not happen without improved battery technology. So our green revolution cannot happen without those minerals. The problem, as you stated, is that many of those minerals are found on indigenous land or directly adjacent to current tribal land or historical, important cultural sites for many tribes in Nevada. And so we are having a real struggle in the state on what to do about that. President Biden has made mining in Nevada a priority for the green transition, and we do have mines that are opening up for lithium. But while we need lithium for battery technology and renewables, lithium extraction is extremely hard on the land and on the people nearby. It is a noxious process. And so I think it is really important that we are consulting with tribes, not just the one that is nearby on the land right there, but the tribal community more broadly to get input on how we can do this in a just way. I don't necessarily want to speak for people. Instead, I want to make sure that they are being heard, that we are passing the mic to them and we are hearing what the communities need so that we can do this in a just way, because we cannot have a green transition that is not a just transition.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So you mentioned the Biden administration, and this next question is actually for all of you, but we are about to start another election cycle. 2024 is going to be a big year. We might have a new president. And so, yeah, I'm curious if you could maybe each talk about, how is your work impacted by federal policy and the federal government, and what's at stake in the 2024 election when it comes to addressing the climate crisis. So Rosanne, I'll start with you.
All right, that's definitely a tough question. I know that in this current administration, as you mentioned, the Green Revolution, it's been beneficial because there's been a lot of dollars coming down to states and cities, allowing us to do a lot of this work. I think our challenge will be, if a different administration comes in, what's going to happen to all of that funding? And then how do we replenish it? How do we continue to do the work that we've already started, particularly in our disadvantaged communities when the funding runs out? We have challenges in our state legislature, and we've lost funding not only in cities all across the valley, so that it even makes it more challenging for us. So I think for us, we are partnering together and working more regionally, so that we can bring in all of the cities within Maricopa County, where we are right now, even Pinal County, to really come up with solutions that we can all work on together. But yes, that is a big challenge for us.
So I am an elected official, so of course I'm going to tell you that elections matter, and they do. I think on a federal level, the state of Nevada, the vast majority of our state is owned by the federal government. So whatever administration is in charge, they are going to determine how that land can be leased. So back to the question we were just talking about, mines lease land, solar can be leased land, wind companies lease land, all of that is tied to the federal administration. So I do think the federal is important, but I also think the local is critical, because sometimes it feels like we need the president to fix this. And I don't think it's just the president. I think city councils can make a difference. I think that county commissioners can make a difference. I think that state legislatures can make a difference. And so what I think is really critical is that we are electing people that recognize this as a crisis, that want to do something and are proposing solutions at whatever level that they are running at to address this issue.
Thank you.
Well said.
Yeah.
I guess I would just say, from California's perspective, first of all, beyond over the moon grateful for the Biden administration's historic investment in climate action that's really delivering results on the ground around the country. And second, just to say that, California has been and will continue to be a leader on climate, regardless of who's in the White House. And we really hope that we have partners who are committed to addressing the climate crisis from here on and out, but we'll always be committed to that leadership, regardless.
So you just mentioned, that you're grateful for the investments that the Biden administration is making, and we've all heard about the bipartisan infrastructure law. Could you talk a little bit about how that's made a difference in California, or how those investments are being used?
Yeah, California is positioning itself for a very wide range of funding that has become available. So a few things I'll just tick off my head is, we just were awarded funding to create a hydrogen hub in California. We are positioning ourselves. We got funding to create a plan called the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. We're going to create a plan that we are then going to be able to access billions of dollars for implementation money to implement that plan, just as many other states have received CPRG dollars. We've got a huge amount of climate smart agriculture dollars coming out that we want California to be as competitive for as possible. So we're just, wherever there's money, we're going for it.
Do you all have any projects that you're aware of that are benefiting from the Inflation Reduction Act?
Sure. So I can speak to one in Nevada. There are numerous, so I won't list all of them, but one we just passed this last session was taking advantage of money for zero emission vehicles. So our state purchased vehicles, we are going to try to make those zero emission vehicles as much as possible. And then we are also able to give grants for large vehicles. So I think semi trucks, freight trucks, buses. In Nevada, our number one climate emitter is from vehicle emissions. And so our focus is trying to reduce those vehicle emissions. And we've been able to leverage federal dollars to help that happen.
So with the Biden dollars, we've been able to, again, do a lot of what you've been mentioned. We also have a climate pollution reduction grant as well that we're looking to implement. And I think a couple of the big ones are that we have received money to do the tree and shade. So that's a big impact for us as far as heat goes. And then we have funding as well for our transition to EVs. So our goal for the city is to have 280,000 EVs by 2030. We're just starting that infrastructure, which has been really important to get those charging stations in not only public facilities, but other areas as well. So those are two critical things that we're working on.
Great, thanks so much. So my final question is also for all of you. But I imagine that a lot of our audience members are here because they care about the climate crisis. They probably want to be a part of a solution in some way. But I think it can be kind of hard to know where to start. It's such a large issue. There's so many different ways you could become involved. It can also be very overwhelming. So what advice would you give to our audience who wants to act on the climate crisis and maybe isn't sure where to start or where to direct their energy?
For me, one of the things I'd like to say is, and co-sign what Selena said, is your vote does matter. It really does, particularly here in Arizona. As you know, we have a challenge with climate deniers in Arizona. We actually have legislation on the books that prevents state agencies from working on climate. So that's how far to the right we are. So we need to change that. So we need all of you to come out and vote when it comes to your state legislators. I also say from a city's perspective, we do a lot of work on the ground. We get work done when you all talk to a city council member, you talk to city management staff, or even if you talk to city staff at my level and express what you need or what you want in your community. People often think that city council don't listen, but I will tell you that they will. The past year or so, a community in Levine actually wanted a new park, and they rallied the neighborhood associations. They rallied everybody together and really came to every budget meeting, came to every city council meeting and said, we want a park in Levine. And you know what? They got a park in Levine. So make your voice heard. And remember, and this comes from my boss who said this so eloquently, every action is a climate action. Everything that you do impacts our climate. So think about it as you go through your day. What little things can you do personally every day? And then that makes a bigger impact as well.
Yeah, I think when thinking about climate change and climate action, it is really easy to become overwhelmed and look at all the horrendous things that are happening around the world and engage in a climate nihilism of, well, nothing matters, I can't do anything, the world's gonna end. And I just encourage you to take the courageous action of saying, no, we can do something. I think that there are people in power that benefit from the status quo that want you to give up and want you to say we can't do anything and want you to just throw your hands up. And I think that every one of us can make a difference. I want you to know there is nothing special, I think, about any of us up here. I think we are all just committed. I am a teacher and a mom who got tired of the situation and decided to run for office. I was not rich or famous. I didn't have anything that was helping me to achieve that anyone in this room doesn't have. And so I'm not saying every one of you has to run for office, though I encourage you if you want to. But you can vote for people that do want to take on climate policy. You can say climate policy is my number one issue. If you are not working on this, you do not earn my vote. You can take individual actions to help with our sustainability, our energy efficiency, our regenerative agriculture. There's so many different ways that individuals can help. And I think the most important one is just holding people accountable, maintaining the faith that we can make a difference, and continuing to chip away.
I guess I would say, you know, to build on the comment from your boss around every action can be a climate action, you know, my passion is policy. So that's why I'm in the policy space. But I could be in the policy space working on some other issue, right? I'm working on climate. Maybe your passion is art. Maybe your passion is engineering. Like whatever your passion is, you can use that passion to push for climate action too. These things are deeply intersectional. So, you know, it's not necessarily about going into a field and, you know, saying like, you know, that's like marked number one with climate, but it's really bringing climate into whatever it is that moves you, which will, I think, also help you push back some of the stress and anxiety that does come from thinking about, you know, the sort of existential crisis that we're facing.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your perspective with us today with the 19th and with our audience. We really appreciate you taking the time. Yeah, that is a wrap on our panel.